My beautiful girlfriend always loves to take off her black stockings during class. I couldn't accept it and proposed a breakup. I didn't expect her to Zudong abandon me and change seats. Without her control, I play around with new girls every day. I fool around with a beautiful classmate. One day, I don't know what got into her. She blocked me at the school gate. She pinched my chin and questioned me. "Are you so happy sitting next to Lin Yue?" Hearing this, I frowned and confidently reminded her, "We have already broken up." A hint of disdain appeared in her eyes as she snorted coldly. "Did I agree to the breakup you mentioned?" "I broke up with my beautiful girlfriend. The hardest part is that we are not only in the same class, but we are also desk mates. Recently, we have started a cold war. The air around us is suffocating. While I was writing the exam, I heard a sound coming from diagonally ahead. A gaga sound. Lu Ruyan, which seat should we choose later?" The blonde is holding the seating chart. I was staring at Lu Ruyan, my eyes nearly falling out. I looked at them speechlessly. This guy is really well informed. We just broke up, and he came sniffing around. "You're a dog, right?" Changing seats after the monthly exam is a tradition at our school. Everyone can choose seats based on their rankings. They can pick their seats in order. Of course, they can also choose their desk mate. I broke up with her last week. We ended up arguing fiercely because of it. I just forgot about it. I didn't expect Lu Ruyan to have already found a replacement. Lu Ruyan's grades are astonishingly good. She consistently ranks first and is always the first to choose. So before, I only needed to sit next to her. But now, right after the breakup, she just brushes me off without a word. She even sits at the same desk as the blonde. She clearly knows that we almost fought over her before. We nearly got into a fight. Fourth group, second row. Lu Ruyan slightly raised her head and said softly. Then she lowered her head and continued with her own business. That spot used to be my favorite. In the past, she would directly write both our names. She would write them all down. But now she doesn't react at all. I was so angry I could almost explode. The blonde guy glanced at me, snorted, and turned back. His thick bangs were violently tossed to the left. I glared fiercely at the back of his head. I wished I could just take his head off. And the person next to him acted as if nothing was wrong. I couldn't be bothered to care anymore. I took a deep breath to calm myself down. Who knows if she is setting a trap for me? Lu Ruyan loves to play mind games. When we first got together, we hadn't even had a chance to punish publicly. Then a blonde guy suddenly appeared. As a result, she insisted on waiting until I was fighting with the blonde guy. Only then did she come out to make a statement when we were both bloodied and battered. My grades are poor. Now that she's gone, there are hardly any seats left to choose from. Just tomorrow, we're supposed to change seats. I haven't even found a desk mate yet. Lu Ruyan must be thinking right now. Without her, no one will want me, right? I can't show any weakness. After the seating chart was passed to me, I boldly chose the back row of the third group. Not hesitating at all, Lu Ruyan glanced over but didn't say anything. By the time I submitted it, there was only the seat I chose. The absence of a name next to it made me very awkward. Lu Ruyan was stifling a laugh beside me. It felt like she was mocking me for being unwanted. The next day, after the seat change, I was unsurprisingly placed with the last student in the class. I ended up with the very last one. It turned out she hadn't chosen a seat at all. But maybe she's just used to it. Anyway, she always ends up at the bottom, so she doesn't even need to choose. I quickly packed my things and was still holding a stack of books. "Move aside," I said, my tone completely calm and unwavering. It's as if I no longer care about her. In fact, people like Lu Ruyan are easy to deal with. You can't spoil him. She hasn't started tidying up yet. Sitting in her seat with her arms crossed. With a cold expression, she remained motionless. Clearly, she was the one who abandoned me first. She also wanted to change her seat. What are you pretending for? I don't want to waste words with her. The desks of the third group and the second group are pushed together. I went directly past the two people sitting next to me. I squeezed past from behind. This immediately caused dissatisfaction among my classmates. "Chen Jie, what are you doing? Why didn't you go over from Lu Ruyan's side?" Seeing me holding the book without moving, he turned his head to glance at Lu Ruyan. I originally wanted to say something to Lu Ruyan, but it seemed I was intimidated by Lu Ruyan's gloomy expression. He leaned forward directly against the edge of the table. He made room for me. After a while, everyone had basically changed their seats. But my new desk mate still hasn't arrived. I have never spoken to this Lestrange person. Moreover, she usually has no expression towards others. She looks very aloof and seems hard to deal with. It's all that stinky woman Lu Ruyan's fault for delaying me. She is now leaning against the wall, carefree. Her hands are resting on the desks in front and behind her. She is chatting with the people standing in the hallway, looking quite content. I can feel her gaze. Occasionally, she glances over at me, but I pretend to talk to someone else and don't look at her. After a while, the people in the hallway left. She started chatting with the blonde guy again. I stared at her cold, beautiful profile, feeling disdain in my heart. She really knows how to put on an act. Usually, she acts like a high and mighty academic who doesn't want to be bothered. In reality, she is just a sickly girl with an obsessive need for control. When I'm with her, she even keeps track of how many times I go to the bathroom in a day. My time doesn't belong to me at all. She fills my schedule to the brim. She's even stricter than my mom. I was cursing in my heart. I accidentally fell into her deep, dark eyes. Just as I wanted to dodge, she called out to me. "Chen Jie, who is your desk mate?" I scoffed. She was just asking knowingly. I originally didn't want to answer. But the blonde also turned around, looking provocative. So I replied irritably, "Lin Yue." Compared to her gentle glance when she looked up, I seemed to lose my composure. My tone was heavy and filled with reluctance. Lu Ruyan was very pleased with my reaction. She subtly raised the corners of her mouth. She turned away and stopped looking at me. "You seem to be quite dissatisfied with me, huh?" A deep, pleasant voice from my new deskmate sounded from behind me. Lin Yue arrived late. She picked up her backpack and threw it directly onto the table. It made a thud sound. I jumped in surprise. She looks even more fierce today than I remembered. It seems like she has newly dyed pink hair. I unconsciously swallowed and gently shook my head. She suddenly smiled for no reason. The gloom on her face disappeared in an instant. She smiled widely, revealing a row of clean teeth. She transformed directly from a devil into an angel. How can someone have such a big contrast? Oh no, Lu Ruyan also has quite a contrast. What are you afraid of? Can I eat you? The corners of her mouth lifted, exuding a bit of a punk vibe. I suddenly wasn't afraid of her anymore. I gritted my teeth and tried to save face. Who shook? That was you shaking me. I was shaking, how did I not know? She pretended to be surprised. She couldn't hold it for a few seconds before revealing her true nature. She smiled with ill intentions. I immediately realized and my face turned hot and red. Unlike Lu Ruyan's cold and aloof appearance, Lin Yue is very striking. She's the kind that's very aggressive. Her pupils are shiny black, and her double eyelids split at the outer corners. They slightly tilt upwards. She has plenty of earrings and tattoos. She looks like a complete bad girl. If I weren't sitting next to her, I probably wouldn't have any contact with her. But even so, Lin Yue's romantic prospects are constantly blooming. Just now, she was called outside by a boy to show off. However, she ruthlessly rejected him. She even said that he was too young to be irresponsible. Hearing this made me laugh. She doesn't even study herself. Yet she has the nerve to say others are irresponsible. She said casually, I just want to chill. I can't drag others down with me. Well, her academic performance is quite strong. She knows she can't pull others down. I originally didn't want to meddle, but considering we're desk mates, I decided to remind her. You're only in your second year of high school. If you study a bit, you should be able to catch up. If this continues, what are you planning to do in the future? She saw me lecturing seriously. She was taken aback for a moment and then smiled. She leaned down, propped her face with one hand, and her eyes were full of amusement. Are you so interested in me? What nonsense are you talking? I'm just afraid you might regret it in the future. She didn't say anything, but her lips had a faint smile. She looked at me meaningfully and intently. I really couldn't ignore the fact that my face was burning from being looked at. I pushed her aside a bit. Alright then, I need to study, don't disturb me. She actually listened. Nodding her head, she turned around unsteadily. In fact, I can barely take care of myself. I don't even have the right to criticize others. Because I'm the kind of person that's often talked about. Someone who works hard but has no results. Looking at the math problem in front of me, I felt overwhelmed. This is only the third multiple choice question. I was so anxious that my palms were sweating. I wrote those numbers on the scratch paper. I kept writing them back and forth but just couldn't calculate. Suddenly, my ears felt warm. I turned my head and saw Lin Yue's clear brows and eyes. She leaned over to look at the questions next to me. My heart skipped a beat for no reason. I quickly moved the questions towards the center. I shifted my body outward to create some distance from her. Lin Yue picked up the only gel pen on the table. She casually scribbled a few notes on the draft paper. She solved it quickly. You're not doing so well, study-loving classmate. I didn't argue back against her sneer. I just felt exhausted after studying for so long. I wasn't even as good as those who didn't study. For a moment, I forgot to look at the demonstration steps she pushed in front of me. Demonstration steps. She looked down on me so much that she didn't wait for me to deny it. She directly tore off the draft paper she had just written on. She crumpled it into a ball. She raised her hand and threw it straight into the corner trash can. I guess that was a pointless move on my part. She threw me an extremely unfriendly smile. She is sleeping on the table again. This person really changes their attitude quickly. After being desk mates for a few days, I found out that Lin Yue really doesn't study at all. As soon as the class bell rings, she puts her coat over her head and starts to sleep soundly. At this time, who would dare to disturb her? She would definitely get a scolding. The teacher has completely given up. They still take the opportunity to remind the class with her sarcastic tone. To remind the people in the class, Lin Yue's family is in big business, you know. If she doesn't get into college, she can still go home and rely on her parents. Just a second ago, Lin Yue was still sleeping. After hearing the words, rely on parents, she shot up. The storm came without any warning. The chair was kicked over by her, landing on its back. The metal clashed with the ground, making a jarring sound. The teacher's words came to an abrupt stop. All the eyes in the class were focused on her. Lin Yue ignored the language teacher's insults. With her hands in her pockets, she walked out with a look of disdain. The language teacher was embarrassed and her face turned red. She slammed the multimedia table in anger, making a loud noise. If any of you dare to follow her example, you'll end up not passing the exam and having to work on a construction site. From that day on, Lin Yue never attended the language teacher's class again. I heard her dad originally intended for her to transition at school for a while, and then send her abroad, so no one could control her. The afternoon study session happened to be with the language teacher. I was sent to the hallway because I left a question blank in my workbook. I was sent out to the hallway. A few days ago, Lin Yue told me that the language teacher was going through menopause. I didn't believe it, but clearly, many others had blank questions too. Why was it just me? Is it a case of the city gate catching fire and the fish in the moat suffering? I couldn't help but ask her. How can you still ask others? The empty space is someone else's concern. What I'm talking about now is your problem. The language teacher was scolding me while pointing at my nose. With your attitude towards studying, why even study? You might as well go home. I left a fingernail mark on the exercise book. I subconsciously stole a glance at Lu Ruyan. She used to check my homework thoroughly. She helped me find and fill in the gaps, so there were never any mistakes. She was watching me from start to finish. With a serious face, her brows furrowed and her eyes full of blame. It was as if she was saying I couldn't even do this right. She nitpicks and never makes mistakes herself. She thinks I must be the same as her. As long as I exceed her set boundaries, she would get angry. I bit my lip hard, tears welling up in my eyes. I walked out without looking back. The language teacher's voice was still in my mind. It lingered and circled around. This is what they mean by, you become like those you associate with. The corridor is empty. Everyone is buried in their studies in the classroom. I feel like a piece of trash that has been thrown away. I sway with my head down in the wind. Suddenly, my wrist was tightened. Before I could react, a force pulled me down the stairs. My vision was blurred and wet with tears. I could only see a small, thin figure. The hem of the clothes fluttered wildly in the wind. In the blink of an eye, we were on the grass of the playground. Lin Yue, why did you bring me out here? We'll definitely get scolded when we go back. Once I realized, I shook her hand off. Lin Yue tilted her head, looking at me with a wronged expression. She laughed in anger, telling me to behave. Won't she come after you for this? I was taken aback and shook my head. I didn't know either. But I have been instilled with one idea since childhood. That is to listen to the teacher's words. Why are you acting like a fool? Standing around like that is a waste of time. Lin Yue seems to think I'm beyond help. She ignored me and just lay down on the lawn. One leg bent, her hands crossed behind her head. I was unconvinced and walked over to kick her. Then what do you think is meaningful to say? She looked at me for a moment. Slowly, she curled one side of her mouth. By the time I realized what she was about to do, it was already too late. Her slender fingers quickly wrapped around my hand. She pulled down, and I ended up squatting on the ground. The red glow of the sunset shone on the girl's face. She squinted her eyes and looked at the sky. There was unexpectedly a hint of melancholy in her eyes. There are many meaningful things. For example, watching the sunset in the sky. Feel the summer breeze and think about your future. I sat on the ground with my arms supporting me behind my back. I tilted my head slightly to listen to her speak. I didn't expect her to have this sight. She suddenly turned her head, her gaze sharpening. She tightly held onto my gaze. Her tone became firm. Which of these isn't better than you puffing over there? As she spoke, she actually raised one hand. She placed it horizontally over her eyes. Imitating my earlier demeanor, she pretended to sob. I was amused and playfully hit her on the shoulder. A familiar voice of Chen Jie came from behind. My back instantly stiffened. Lu Rian's bangs slightly covered her brows and eyes, but it couldn't hide the anger on her face. In her hand hanging by her side was a pack of tissue paper. At that moment, the laughter abruptly stopped as she squeezed it, making it bulge. Upon seeing the pack in Lu Rian's hand, which was an unopened pack of cream paper, my heart tightened suddenly. I have allergic rhinitis. During seasonal changes or when I cry, my nose always gets red from blowing it. It's so dry that it might even break the skin. There was one time I used a whole big pack and it still wasn't enough. Later, she always kept a box at her feet. A box of tissue specifically for me. My nose has never been chafed again. I don't have to bring my own anymore. Why are you here? My heart softened for a moment. I temporarily forgot the way she looked at me just now. I pushed my hands against the ground, trying to use it for support to get up. As a result, my steps faltered and I fell back to the ground. Lin Yue smiled and scolded me softly, calling me an idiot as she sat up. Then she extended her arm in front of me. She touched my hand, signaling me to help her. Only then was I able to stand up smoothly. Lu Rian looked at me coldly as I slowly walked up to her. Her gaze slowly moved down from my face, finally landed on the knee of the black school uniform. She pulled out a piece of paper, squatting down slowly, wiping away the almost invisible dust. Emotionlessly, she uttered a word. I glanced down at the black fabric, which didn't seem dirty. Instead, Lin Yue snickered behind me. Hearing the sound, I curiously turned around. My neck suddenly felt chilly. Lu Rian's fingers rested on the back of my neck. She pinched gently, turned slightly, and then pulled me closer to her. When I looked up again, I saw Lu Rian passing by me. She looked down at Lin Yue, who was still sitting on the ground. She is usually quite cold. She looks at people with an almost calm demeanor. I've never seen her look at anyone like that. It was threatening. The whole atmosphere became gloomy. I wanted to break free from the restraint on my neck. Unfortunately, I was firmly held by her and couldn't move at all. I was just about to lose my temper. Then I heard a voice coming from a distance. Lu Rian, the Chinese teacher, told everyone outside to go back. You two, hurry up. The class representative for Chinese was standing at the entrance of the teaching building. She waved to us, signaling us. Lu Rian told me and lifted her leg to leave. I held her back, keeping her in place. I looked at Lin Yue, who was alone in the center of the playground. The sky darkened, and she wasn't wearing her school uniform. She looked so lonely. Just now, she had pulled me out of my oppressive emotions. She brought me out. It wouldn't be right to abandon her now, would it? I felt like I was being a traitor. My worries seemed to take on a different flavor in Lu Rian's eyes. It seemed to change in nature. My arm, being gripped tightly, suddenly hurt. She leaned in close to my ear and let out a cold laugh. Are you really that reluctant to let go? I ignored her. My gaze remained fixed on Lin Yue. She placed her backpack behind her. One hand rested on her bent knee. The other hand pressed up against the corners of her mouth. A smile was on her face. After completing these movements, she waved her hand outward, urging me to hurry and leave. Lu Rian took a deep breath and completely lost her patience. She grabbed my collar and quickly dragged me forward. Let go, I can walk by myself. I couldn't keep up with her pace. I was forced to jog along, getting out of breath. I had no choice but to pat her fair hand. I could see the veins bulging on her hand. It was obvious she was holding back her anger. Chen Jie, every time Lu Rian was about to explode, she would grit her teeth and call me by my full name. I instinctively shrank my head back. But then I thought, isn't it because she always pressures me? Did you just bring up the breakup? Now that it doesn't matter anymore, what are you afraid of? So I forced myself to meet her angry gaze. Lu Rian slightly narrowed her eyes. It's been a few days, and you've really grown some skills. After saying that, she threw the cream paper at me. Then she turned around with an unhappy expression and walked towards the classroom. And I had no choice but to follow her pace. As we approached the classroom door, Lu Rian suddenly turned around and stopped. The beauty mark at the corner of her eye was so close. A sense of oppression overwhelmed me. Lu Rian always had this ability. She can make you feel breathless without saying a word. You better behave yourself. After saying that, she shook me off and walked straight into the class. After I let out a sigh of relief, I rolled my eyes at her back. I looked up and saw that almost half of the class was there. Everyone is in the hallway. They are gradually going in. It's strange that I just finished revising the booklet. Am I the only one being rushed out? I looked towards the classroom. The Chinese teacher hasn't taken her eyes off Lu Rian since she entered the class. Her gaze has never left her. Her expression is very unpleasant. She picked up the thermos on the desk, took a sip of water, thoughtfully looked at the seats in the second row. After pondering for quite a while, she finally lowered her voice to speak. Lu Rian, don't think you can stir up trouble just because you're good at studying, and fan the flames in the class. If there's a next time, be careful. I just happened to walk in. I heard it very clearly. The rest of the words were not finished. I saw Lu Rian looking at her calmly. Then please treat everyone equally. Don't play favorites. Her voice wasn't loud. It just happened to resonate throughout the classroom. The Chinese teacher blushed under the gaze of the entire class. In the end, she was left speechless. The hand hanging in midair had no choice but to reluctantly drop down. What happened here? I just sat down in my seat. The boy in front eagerly turned his head. Sure, Chen Jie. To think it could make a top student. Go against the teacher for you. I looked puzzled. What does it mean with a furrowed brow? He widened his eyes and gasped. Didn't you see it outside? Lu Ruyan took the initiative to ask to stand outside for you. She said she also left questions blank. In the end, everyone in the class who left questions blank, all followed them out. You didn't see the expression on the Chinese teacher's face. It was almost as dark as coal. She really knows how to handle things. I stared in astonishment. The boy in front was laughing so hard he was doubled over. My head feels a bit heavy. Lu Ruyan, such a meticulous person. How could she possibly leave questions blank? And the upright figure in front didn't mind the Chinese teacher's furious gaze at all, calmly flipping through the test paper. Is she really doing this for me? I was staring blankly at the front row. I wonder if her deskmate, the blonde, has an eye in the back of her head. She noticed my gaze and turned around to glare at me fiercely. To be honest, Lu Rian treats me very well. I initially suggested breaking up just to accuse her. She never asks about my feelings. She imposes her own ideas on me without consideration. So I thought about using the breakup to force her to change. During those days, she hardly paid attention to me. I thought she had compromised. Just when I wanted to show weakness, she unexpectedly changed seats without saying a word. I was completely furious. The next morning, Lin Yue was propping her head up, watching me study. I couldn't take it anymore. There was no need to endure. I turned to meet her probing gaze. What exactly do you want to do? What is your relationship with Lu Rian? There's no relationship. You were all over her as soon as you saw her yesterday. Still said it was okay. Who put it up? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Keep a calm mindset. Manage your expressions well. Lay the books that were standing up flat on the table. I raised an eyebrow, mimicking her teasing tone from last time. You're so interested in me? She wasn't embarrassed at all. Instead, she curled her lips into a smile. She slightly adjusted her eyebrows. She nodded without any concealment. Not serious at all. I like studying, so we have no chance. You like Lu Rian? She didn't ask me. Said it in an extremely certain tone. Even Lin Yue could see it. Why can't Lu Rian give me a way out? Thinking of this, I felt like a frostbitten eggplant. I didn't answer and lowered my gaze. Unconcealed sadness. The person I put effort into pursuing. How could I just say I don't like her and mean it? It's just too suffocating. I just want her to change a bit for me. Lin Yue suddenly nudged me with her elbow. She tilted her chin towards the aisle. Her body was completely turned towards me. She struck a pose as if watching a show. I turned my head in suspicion. The blonde stood next to my desk. Look at that little expression. His tail is about to wag up to the sky. Thank you, Chen Jie. I didn't respond. I was waiting to see what ivory could come out of his dog mouth. The hand he had behind his back reached out. He took out a notebook and opened it in front of me. It was Lu Rian's notes. There were straight lines that could be drawn without a ruler. A very familiar study plan. At a glance, it looked almost identical to mine. Almost exactly the same. I wanted to pick it up and take a closer look, but the blonde snatched it away and hugged it to his chest. Compared to how I looked when I saw this plan, I had a look of deep resentment. He treasured it very much. Lu Rian worked hard to improve her studies for me. It really takes a lot of effort. You know, she never wastes time doing these things for unrelated people. Yeah, with someone like Lu Rian, the belief that time is money. Others ask her questions. They all need to find the right time and place. It seems like I have an exception, but not anymore. I tilted my chin up defiantly. I gave a smile that I thought was very disdainful. You can have whatever I don't want. This is what you said. In the future, don't bother Lu Rian too much. Especially not to make her do things that aren't worth it for you. You should go back and tell her this. Tell her not to bother me. Watching helplessly as the blonde returned to Lu Rian's side, I sulkily closed the book upside down. Half of my face buried in the crook of my arm. Finally, the tears fell uncontrollably. Yeah, Lu Rian doesn't need it at all. If she changes for me, someone will love her. I took myself too seriously. Hey, Lin Yue said softly, dragging out the last syllable. Her voice was lazy, as if she was watching a joke unfold. I sniffed and covered my ears. She still wouldn't let it go. She kicked my chair with her toes again. The vibration traveled up the aluminum chair leg. I irritably turned my head to the other side. As a result, the whole chair was roughly pulled over by her foot. I ended up in a full embrace with her. A chuckle echoed back from her chest. As for Shu, I was just worried I had no place to vent my anger. I completely exploded and shouted, "What do you know?" Lin Yue's temper also blows up at the slightest thing. I just don't understand. People are literally shitting on your head. Lu Rian doesn't even care. A grown man crying every day. Isn't that disgusting? I couldn't argue back against her. The desire for revenge made her glare at me. Lin Yue had a dark expression on her face. Irritated, she turned her head away. We faced off for a few seconds. She met my gaze again. She raised her hand and wiped away my tears with her fingertip. She muttered a curse under her breath. Because Lin Yue and I were arguing fiercely, people in front turned to look at us. Their looks suggested they thought Lin Yue had done something to me. They were so idle, they all turned to look at us. Before the words even finished, a shadow loomed over me. Lin Yue grabbed the coat next to her. She directly draped it over my head. It blocked the prying eyes. At the same time, a voice came to my ear, neither loud nor soft. It carried a hint of resentment. I knew you would provoke me. Since that day, Lu Rian hasn't contacted me again. I guess Huang Mao must have relayed my words. This line appears to be a character or symbol without context. The month has passed midway and exam week is approaching. I turn my sorrow into strength. I bury myself in solving problems. Your math is poor because your methods are wrong. You refuse to change and stubbornly go down the wrong path. If you're not trash, then who is? A contemptuous voice lightly drifts into my ears. The pen I tightly grip trembles. Did I just imagine that? How did it come to Lin Yue scolding me? I turned my head in a daze. She actually looked at me with a dumbfounded expression. Under my incredulous gaze, Lin Yue sighed and said helplessly, "How about this? You bring me breakfast every morning from now on. How about I teach you how to solve math problems?" I was in a daze for a while. I finally found my voice again. "Lin Yue, did you take the wrong medicine? Or are you really the type that the old teacher mentioned? Hiding the truth. The one waiting for the final explosion." She smiled slightly, her brows furrowing. My face clearly shows that I'm speechless. Have you watched too many movies? The math teacher's voice is so sharp. How could I possibly fall asleep? Besides, he can explain one type of question 800 times. The annoying sound has drilled into my ears. Teaching you is more than enough. Thank you, I feel insulted. But my math is indeed ridiculously poor. Whether she really knows or not, it's worth a try, right? Just tell me if you want me to teach you. I instantly put on a fawning expression. Lin Yue explains the problem very clearly. She is very good at drawing inferences. Her thought process is indeed completely different from someone like me, who is bad at math. Completely different. This morning, as agreed, I bought 2 packs of sandwiches. I walked to my seat and brought them to her. At this moment, Lu Rian also came in. She stopped in the aisle as she passed by me. Her gaze fell on the breakfast in my hand. She glanced at it, said nothing, and left. It would be a lie to say my heart is completely calm. Previously, as long as she was a little unhappy, I would be like a headless fly. But now I don't know if it's because my attention has shifted to studying. I'm not so flustered anymore. Seeing my hand freeze while unboxing, Lin Yue tapped the table in dissatisfaction. The knocking sound pulled my thoughts back. Do you want to starve me? No one will explain the problems to you then. Just let yourself be foolish. Under the dual assault of her words and gaze, my movements quickened. Here you go. I'm busy. I can't bring my hand over for you to take a bite. Lin Yue is indeed solving problems. I brought the sandwich to her mouth. Lin Yue stayed still without eating. Her eyes held a provocative meaning, staring at a spot diagonally ahead. Who are you looking at? I followed her gaze to see. Halfway turn. My head was pushed down. Don't worry about who I'm looking at, focus on your problems. I stayed behind for duty after school in the evening. There weren't many people left when I left. To exit our school, we first had to pass through an alley before reaching the main road. The only person visible is at the end of the road. The front is a vast and dim space. I heard footsteps behind me growing clearer. I instinctively turned around. My arm was suddenly grabbed from behind. A wave of dizziness hit me, and my back pressed against the wall. As I opened my eyes, a small hand tightly grasped my collar. Are you having a lively chat with Lin Yue? Lu Rian looked down at me from above. I was confused but still frowned. I sternly reminded her. We have already broken up. Did I agree to that? Then did you deny it? Seeing that I didn't back down, she released her grip. My eyes were filled with darkness, blending into the night. Next time we switch seats, I'll switch you back. Let's pretend you never mentioned the breakup. Her tone was completely emotionless. It seems like everything is taken for granted. I was really so angry that I laughed. What am I? Am I just someone she can summon and dismiss at will? I opened my mouth but hadn't spoken yet. Suddenly, my left shoulder felt heavy. There was an extra arm resting on top. The weight of half a body was resting on my shoulder. That annoying Lin Yue. I don't know where she popped out from. The fabric of her sleeve brushed against my chin. It carried a hint of coolness. Did I agree to change seats with her? Lu Rian looked like she had heard a joke. She laughed as if she was determined to win. Does it concern you who he sits with? Lin Yue was not affected at all by her low mood. Instead, she scoffed. Does it matter to you whether he changes seats or not? Are you trying to steal my friend? Where does your confidence come from if you can't even get a sandwich? Both of them spoke with a strong undertone of hostility. I don't want to get entangled any further. I said directly to Lu Rian. You've already chosen Huang Mao, so don't come looking for me again. This is the first time I've openly rejected her. Lu Ruyan was clearly about to explode with anger, yet she was trying hard to suppress it. You don't know why I chose Huang Mao back then. The reason for being desk mates? I didn't answer and turned to leave. Of course I know. It was to punish me for not listening to her. Her way of solving problems is always to change me. I have thought about changing her mind too. Huh.